The hospice room smelled like lavender and lies. My grandmother, Eleanor Hartwell, was dying, and my Uncle Richard was celebrating. I could see it in the way he stood by her bedside, his hand resting possessively on the mahogany rail, his fingers drumming a quiet rhythm of victory. He thought I couldn't hear him. He thought the morphine had taken her too far under. But Grandma's eyes found mine across the room, sharp and clear for just a moment, and in that look I saw everything. She knew what he was doing, and she had prepared for it. Drop a comment, and let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I'm Maya Hartwell, 32 years old, a forensic accountant who spent the last decade tracking financial crimes for the federal government. My job is to follow money through mazes of shell corporations and offshore accounts to find the paper trail that criminals think they've burned. I'm trained to see patterns, to notice the inconsistencies, the timestamps that don't align, the signatures that look just a little too perfect. So when I walked into that hospice room at 3:47 in the afternoon and saw my Uncle Richard standing over my grandmother with a leather portfolio and a notary public I'd never seen before, every alarm in my professional brain started screaming. "Maya," Richard said, not turning around. His voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of a man who'd spent 40 years in corporate law learning how to sound reasonable while doing unreasonable things. "You're early. I thought you weren't coming until 6. I set my bag down slowly, watching. The notary, a thin woman in her 50s with nervous hands, was stuffing papers into her briefcase with the frantic energy of someone trying to leave a crime scene. "Traffic was better than I expected," I said, keeping my voice neutral. My grandmother's eyes were closed now, her breathing shallow and rattling. The hospice nurse had told me this morning that she had maybe 2 days left, maybe 3. Her mind was mostly gone, they said, drifting in and out of lucidity. She wouldn't recognize me, they warned. But when I'd arrived 15 minutes ago and stood outside the door, listening, I'd heard her voice. Weak, yes. Confused, maybe. But present. "Richard," she had whispered. "The girls. You have to promise me the girls will be taken care of." "Of course, Mother," Richard had replied. "Don't you worry about a thing. The girls. That's what she called us. Me and my sister, Iris, who had died 3 years ago in a car accident, leaving behind 2 daughters Grandma adored. Grandma had always said the house would go to us, the house and the trust fund she built from the sale of Grandpa's pharmaceutical company. $2 million, split evenly. I looked at the notary. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "What's going on?" I asked. Richard finally turned. He was 58, tall, with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that whispered old money. He smiled at me, the smile of a man who'd already won and was just enjoying the aftertaste. "Mother wanted to update her will," he said. "Make sure everything was in order well before the end." I walked closer to the bed. Grandma's hands were folded over the blanket, thin and spotted with age. Her wedding ring, the one she'd worn for 63 years, was gone. I noticed that immediately. The pale indentation on her finger was still there, but the gold band was missing. "Where's her ring?" I asked. Richard glanced at Grandma's hand, then back at me. She wanted me to hold on to it. For safekeeping. Safekeeping. That's right. I looked at the notary. "Did you witness my grandmother sign a document today?" The woman's face went red. Yes. Miss Hartwell was of sound mind, and what time?" She blinked. "Excuse me. What time did she sign it?" The notary looked at Richard, who gave her a small nod. She pulled out a carbon copy from her briefcase, her hands shaking slightly. 3:32 p.m. I looked at my watch. It was 3:51. 14 minutes ago. I pulled out my phone and opened my call log. There, at 3:28 p.m., was a missed call from the hospice. I'd been in a meeting, my phone on silent. I checked my voicemail. The nurse's voice was urgent. "Miss Hartwell, this is Stephanie from Evergreen Hospice. Your grandmother is asking for you. She's very agitated. Please call back as soon as possible." I played it on speaker. Richard's expression didn't change, but I saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. "She was asking for me," I said. "At 3:28. 4 minutes before she supposedly signed a new will. But I was in a meeting. I didn't get the message." "She was confused," Richard said smoothly. "She thought you were already here. The morphine, you understand. I looked at the notary. Ma'am, when you arrived, was my grandmother conscious? The woman hesitated. She seemed to understand what was happening. Did she speak? Another pause. Mr. Hartwell explained the documents to her. She nodded. Yes. Did she sign her name, or did someone guide her hand? The notary's face went from red to white. Mr. Hartwell helped stabilize the paper. Her hands were shaking. I felt a cold, sharp clarity settle over me. This wasn't grief. This wasn't shock. This was the moment I'd been trained for my entire career. This was a fraud in progress, and I was watching it happen in real time. I'd like to see the will, I said. Richard crossed his arms. That's between Mother and her attorney. You're her attorney. Exactly. Attorney-client privilege. She's my grandmother. I'm her next of kin. I'm her son, and I'm handling her affairs. I looked at Grandma. Her chest rose and fell in that terrible, mechanical rhythm of someone whose body was still fighting even though the mind had already started to leave. I thought about Iris, my brilliant, reckless sister who had died on a rainy highway with a blood alcohol level of .12. I thought about her daughters, Chloe and Emma, 7 and 9 years old, living with Iris's ex-husband in a 2-bedroom apartment in Phoenix, struggling. Grandma had promised them. She promised us. The house, the trust, the security. She'd said it 100 times. You girls will never have to worry. I looked back at Richard. I'm going to contest this. He smiled. You're welcome to try. I will. Good luck finding a lawyer who will take the case. Mother was of sound mind. The notary will testify. It's done, Maya. Accept it. I picked up my bag and walked to the door. I stopped at the threshold and turned back. Tell me something, Richard. How much did you leave me in the new will? He didn't answer. Nothing. I asked. Still nothing. Because in the will Grandma wrote 5 years ago, the one I helped her draft, she left the house to me and the trust to Iris's daughters. You got the stocks, the bonds, the liquid assets. About $800,000. You were fine with that, weren't you? You told her it was generous. You said you were proud of her for taking care of the girls. Richard's smile faded. So what changed? I asked. Did you run through your inheritance from Dad already? Did the investments go south? Or did you just decide that $2 million sounded better than $800,000? Get out, Maya. I looked at Grandma one more time. Her eyes were still closed, but I saw her fingers twitch, just slightly. A tiny movement, barely perceptible. I walked out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I leaned against the wall, closed my eyes, and counted to 10. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't punch the wall, even though my hands were shaking with the urge. I did what I was trained to do. I started building the case. I pulled out my phone and called my office. Tom, it's Maya. I need a favor. I'm sending you a name and an address. I need you to pull every financial record you can find. Bank accounts, credit cards, mortgage statements, everything. Legal subpoena, full audit. Tom was quiet for a moment. Is this about your grandmother? Yes. Maya, I'm sorry, but you know I can't. It's fraud, Tom. My uncle just forged her signature on a will revision while she was under sedation. I need the evidence. Another pause. Are you sure? I'm sure. Okay. Send me the details. I hung up and texted him Richard's information. Then I called the hospice administrator and requested a copy of Grandma's medical records for the past week, specifically her cognitive assessments and medication logs. Then I called my lawyer, David Shen, a probate specialist I'd worked with on a case 3 years ago. David, I need you to file an emergency injunction blocking the execution of a will revision. I have evidence of undue influence and potential forgery. How strong is the evidence? Strong enough to start. I'll have more in 48 hours. Send me everything you have. I hung up and stood there in the hallway, my phone in my hand, staring at the closed door of Grandma's room. I could hear Richard's voice inside, low and calm, probably talking to the notary, probably telling her not to worry, that everything was fine. I thought about something my grandmother had told me when I was in college, struggling through my first accounting exam. She'd sat me down at her kitchen table, poured me a cup of tea, and said, Maya, you're not like your sister. Iris is fire. She's all passion and impulse. But you have ice. You have patience. And patience is the most dangerous weapon in the world, because the people who underestimate it never see it coming. Richard thought he'd won. He thought I was the quiet one, the obedient one, the one who'd accepted her place in the family hierarchy. He didn't know that quiet people are often the ones who've been paying attention. The funeral was held on a Tuesday. It rained, which felt appropriate, the kind of cold November rain that turns everything gray and makes mourning feel mandatory. The church was packed. Grandma had been a fixture in the community, a philanthropist, a volunteer, the kind of woman whose obituary took up half a page in the newspaper and listed 24 organizations she'd supported. Richard gave the eulogy. He spoke about her kindness, her generosity, her unshakable faith. He didn't mention the will. He didn't mention the house. He didn't look at me once during the entire service. I sat in the front pew with Iris's daughters, Chloe and Emma, their small hands in mine. Their father, Marcus, sat on the other side of them, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was a size too small. He was a good man, Marcus. He'd loved Iris, even though she'd made it impossible. After the divorce, he'd taken full custody and never once weaponized the girls. He sent me photos, kept me updated, let them call me whenever they wanted. He leaned over during Richard's speech and whispered, "Did she really leave everything to him?" I squeezed his hand. "We'll see." After the service, there was a reception at Grandma's house. The house, 3 stories of Victorian architecture on 2 acres of land in the historic district, worth at least $1.8 million even in a down market. The house where I'd spent every summer as a child, where Iris and I had hidden in the attic and made plans to run away to Paris, where Grandma had taught me to bake bread and balance a checkbook and stand up for myself even when it was terrifying. Richard had already changed the locks. I found out when I tried to use my key to get into the back door, the one that led to the kitchen. The key didn't fit. I stood there on the porch, rain dripping off the overhang, staring at the new brass deadbolt, and I felt something inside me shift. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was personal. I walked around to the front door. Richard was standing in the foyer, greeting mourners, playing the role of the grieving son. He saw me and smiled, that same smooth, empty smile. "Maya, I'm so sorry. I forgot to tell you. I had to change the locks for security purposes. There have been some break-ins in the neighborhood." I smiled back. "Of course. That makes sense. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I walked through the house, nodding at distant relatives, accepting condolences, eating a piece of the lemon cake that Grandma used to make every Sunday. And while I did all of this, I was cataloging. The furniture was original. The paintings were where they'd always been. The china cabinet, in the dining room, still held the set of Limoges that Grandma had inherited from her mother. Richard hadn't started liquidating yet. He was being careful, respectful, waiting for the dust to settle. But in Grandma's bedroom, I noticed something. The closet door was open. Inside, the built-in safe was visible, the one Grandpa had installed in the 1970s. The door was ajar. Empty. I pulled out my phone and took a photo. Downstairs, I found Richard in the library, pouring himself a scotch. "Richard, I need to ask you something." He looked up. "Of course. Grandma's safe. It's open. Was there anything valuable inside?" He took a sip of his drink. "Just some old jewelry. Sentimental pieces. I've put them in a safety deposit box for now. Didn't want them to go missing during the estate transition." "Which bank?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Why? I'd like to see them." "For Chloe and Emma. Grandma promised Iris she'd leave her pearl necklace to the girls." Richard set his glass down. "Maya, we need to talk about expectations." "Expectations?" "Yes. I know this is difficult, but the will is clear. Mother left the estate to me. That includes the house, the contents, the trust, everything. I'll make sure the girls get some keepsakes, of course, but you need to understand that legally, this is no longer a family matter. It's a probate matter." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was enjoying this. I could see it in the way he stood, the way his shoulders were relaxed, the way his voice carried that faint note of condescension that powerful men use when they're explaining reality to people they consider beneath them. "I understand," I said. "Thank you for clarifying." I walked out of the library, out of the house, into the rain. I got into my car, closed the door, and sat there for a moment, my hands on the steering wheel, staring at the house that was supposed to be mine. Then I opened my phone and pulled up the email Tom had sent me that morning. He'd found something. Richard's financials were a disaster. In the past 2 years, he'd lost almost $300,000 in bad investments, primarily in a tech startup that had gone bankrupt. He'd taken out a second mortgage on his own home. He'd maxed out 3 credit cards. His wife, Patricia, had filed for legal separation 4 months ago, and the divorce proceedings were ugly. She was going for half of everything, and Richard's half was already underwater. He wasn't just greedy. He was desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. I scrolled through the rest of Tom's report. There, buried in the transaction history, was a $15,000 withdrawal from Richard's account 3 weeks ago. The notation, legal services, estate planning. $15,000 to draft a new will and hire a notary willing to bend the rules. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to David Chun with a single word. Evidence. Then I called the bank Grandma had used for 40 years, First National Trust. I asked to speak to the Estate Services Department. A woman named Margaret answered. Hi, Margaret. My name is Maya Hartwell. My grandmother, Eleanor Hartwell, recently passed away. I'm trying to locate her safety deposit box records. Can you help me? I'm so sorry for your loss, Miss Hartwell. Yes, we can help with that. Do you have the box number? I don't actually. Is there a way to look it up? If you're listed as an authorized user, yes. Can I have your ID number? I recited my driver's license number. Margaret typed for a moment, then paused. I see here that Eleanor Hartwell had box 447. And yes, you're listed as an authorized user, along with Iris Hartwell. But I see here that Miss Iris Hartwell is deceased. Yes, she was my sister. I'm very sorry. So that leaves you as the sole authorized user besides Mrs. Hartwell herself. I felt a small, cold thrill run through me. So I can access the box? Yes, with proper identification. Would you like to schedule an appointment? How about today? Let me check. We have an opening at 4 p.m. I'll take it. I hung up and looked at the clock on my dashboard. It was 2:17 p.m. I had less than 2 hours. I drove straight to the bank. The safety deposit box room at First National Trust was exactly what you'd expect. Cold, quiet, and lined with small metal doors. Margaret, a kind woman in her 60s with glasses on a chain, led me into the private viewing room after I'd shown my ID and signed the access log. Box 447, she said, sliding the long metal container onto the table. Take your time. Just ring the bell when you're finished. She left, closing the door softly behind her. I stood there for a moment, looking at the box. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what I expected to find. Jewelry, maybe. Old documents. Sentimental photos. I lifted the lid. Inside was a single manila envelope, thick and sealed with red wax. Across the front, in Grandma's careful handwriting, for Maya, to be opened only after my death. I picked it up. The envelope was heavy, substantial. I broke the seal and pulled out the contents. The first item was a letter, handwritten on Grandma's personal stationery, dated 3 months ago. My dearest Maya, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Richard has done exactly what I feared he would do. I need you to understand something. I'm not senile. I'm not confused. I know exactly what my son is capable of, and I've known it for a long time. When your grandfather died, Richard was the executor of the estate. He was supposed to distribute the inheritance according to the will, half to me, and the remainder split between several charities your grandfather supported. Instead, Richard embezzled $200,000 from the estate, funneled it through a shell company, and told me the charities had been paid. I didn't find out until 2 years later, when one of the charities called to thank me for the donation they'd never received. I confronted Richard. He cried. He apologized. He promised it would never happen again. He said he'd been in a bad place financially, that he'd made a terrible mistake. And like a fool, I believed him. I didn't report it. I didn't tell anyone. I protected him because he was my son, and I thought protecting him was the same thing as loving him. But Maya, protection without accountability isn't love. It's enabling. And I enabled a monster. I've been watching him these past few years. I've seen the way he looks at the house, the way he calculates its value like an appraiser instead of a son. I've heard him on the phone, talking to his lawyer friends about estate planning, about probate loopholes, about how to contest a will. He thinks I don't understand these things, but I understand more than he knows. So I've taken precautions. Enclosed in this envelope is the original will, the one I drafted 5 years ago with your help. It's notarized, signed, and legally binding. I've also included a signed affidavit, witnessed by my doctor and my attorney, attesting to my sound mind and stating explicitly that any will drafted after this date is the result of coercion or fraud. And finally, I've included something Richard doesn't know exists, a full audit of his embezzlement from your grandfather's estate, conducted by a private investigator I hired last year. The evidence is irrefutable. He stole from his own father, and he's going to try to steal from you and the girls. Don't let him, Maya. You have the ice. You have the patience. And now you have the proof. Make him pay. Not for revenge, but for justice. For your grandfather, who trusted him. For Iris, who never got to see her daughters grow up. And for yourself, because you deserve to know that standing up to a bully, even when that bully is family, is the right thing to do. I love you, my darling girl. I always have, and I'm so very proud of the woman you've become. With all my heart, Grandma Eleanor. I set the letter down and looked at the other documents in the envelope. The original will, dated 5 years ago, exactly as Grandma described. Notarized. Signed. Explicit. The affidavit, signed by Grandma, her doctor, Dr. Raymond Cross, and her attorney, Mitchell Brennan, dated 2 months ago. It stated clearly that Eleanor Hartwell was of sound mind, that she had made her wishes known, and that any changes to her estate plan made under duress, coercion, or diminished capacity should be considered null and void. And finally, the investigator's report. 43 pages of bank records, wire transfers, and forged documents showing exactly how Richard had stolen $200,000 from his own father's estate. The report included copies of the original charity allocation instructions, the shell company registration, and a sworn statement from the investigator detailing his findings. It was everything I needed. I sat there in that cold, quiet room, holding the evidence of my uncle's betrayal, and I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. Sad for Grandma, who'd spent her last years knowing her son was a thief. Sad for Grandpa, who died believing his legacy was secure. Sad for the version of Richard who might have existed, the one who could have been a good man if he'd just made different choices. But sadness didn't mean I was going to let him win. I carefully placed everything back in the envelope, sealed it, and walked out of the viewing room. Margaret was waiting at her desk. All finished. Yes. Thank you. Did you find what you were looking for? I looked at her and smiled. I found exactly what I needed. The probate hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Richard's attorney, a man named Gordon Finch with a reputation for winning ugly cases, filed a motion to dismiss my challenge, arguing that I had no standing, that the notarized will was valid, and that my claims of fraud were baseless and emotionally motivated. David Chin filed a counter-motion, attaching the original will, the affidavit, and a request for a full investigation into the circumstances surrounding the will revision. He didn't mention the embezzlement. Not yet. That was the nuclear option, and you don't deploy a nuke until you're sure conventional weapons won't work. The judge assigned to the case was the Honorable Patricia Mills, a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s with a reputation for despising liars and loving the law. I'd never met her, but I'd read about her. She'd once held a lawyer in contempt for trying to introduce falsified evidence. She wasn't the kind of judge you wanted to cross. The hearing was held in a small courtroom on the 3rd floor of the county courthouse. Richard sat at the plaintiff's table with Gordon Finch, looking confident, relaxed. He was wearing a navy suit and a red tie, the uniform of a man who expects to win. I sat at the defendant's table with David Chun, my hands folded in my lap, my expression calm. I'd learned a long time ago that the courtroom is theater, and the person who looks the most composed is the one the jury trusts. Judge Mills entered. We all stood. "Be seated," she said, her voice crisp. "This is a probate challenge brought by Maya Hartwell contesting the validity of a will revision executed by Eleanor Hartwell on October 28th, 2 days before her death. Mr. Finch, you may begin." Gordon Finch stood. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of voice that filled a room without effort. "Your Honor, This case is a tragic example of family conflict masquerading as legal dispute. The facts are simple. Eleanor Hartwell, of sound mind and body, chose to revise her will 2 days before her death. The revision was properly notarized, witnessed, and executed according to state law. Ms. Maya Hartwell, upset that she was not the primary beneficiary, is now attempting to overturn her grandmother's final wishes based on nothing more than hurt feelings and unfounded allegations. He gestured toward Richard. Mr. Richard Hartwell is a respected attorney, a devoted son, and the rightful executor of his mother's estate. The will is clear. The law is clear. This challenge should be dismissed. Judge Mills looked at David Chun. Mr. Chun. David stood. He didn't gesture. He didn't raise his voice. He simply placed a document on the table in front of him and said, Your Honor, I'd like to submit into evidence the original will, dated 5 years ago, along with a signed affidavit from Mrs. Hartwell's physician, an attorney attesting to her cognitive state and explicitly invalidating any coerced revisions. Gordon Finch's face went red. Objection. This is hearsay. The affidavit is a dying declaration, David interrupted calmly. Admissible under Evidence Code 804B, 2. Mrs. Hartwell knew she was dying. She knew her son would attempt to alter her will. She took legal precautions. Judge Mills leaned forward. I'll allow it. Mr. Finch, you'll have an opportunity to cross-examine the witnesses who signed the affidavit. Gordon Finch sat down heavily. I saw him lean over and whisper something to Richard, whose jaw was tight. David continued, Your Honor, I'd also like to request that the court review the medical records from Evergreen Hospice for October 28th, specifically the medication logs and cognitive assessments for Mrs. Hartwell. Judge Mills nodded. Granted. Mr. Finch, do you have the medical records? Gordon Finch shuffled through his papers. We can obtain them. Please do. This hearing is adjourned until you provide those records. We'll reconvene in 1 week. She banged the gavel. I stood, my legs shaking slightly, and walked out of the courtroom with David. In the hallway, he turned to me and smiled. That went better than I expected. He didn't expect the affidavit. No one expects the affidavit. Your grandmother was a very smart woman. I looked back at the courtroom doors. Through the small window, I could see Richard and Gordon Finch in heated conversation, Gordon's hands moving in sharp, frustrated gestures. He's going to come after me now, I said. David nodded. Probably. Be ready. I was ready. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maya. It was Richard. His voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. I don't think that's a good idea. I'm trying to avoid this getting uglier than it needs to be. I didn't respond. Look, he continued. I know you're upset. I know you feel like you deserve more. And you're right. Mother should have been more generous to you. So here's what I'm proposing. I'll give you $100,000 from the estate. Cash. No strings attached. You drop the challenge, and we all move on with our lives. I let the silence stretch out. Maya, are you there? I'm here. So, what do you say? I thought about Grandma's letter. I thought about the embezzlement. I thought about Chloe and Emma, who were supposed to be secure, who were supposed to have their college funds, their futures. I say no. I told him, Don't be stupid, Maya. You're not going to win this. The will was notarized. It's legal. We'll see. I'm trying to be generous here. No, you're trying to buy my silence. There's a difference. His voice dropped, turned cold. You're making a mistake. I've made plenty of mistakes, Richard. This isn't one of them. I hung up. The next morning, I got an email from an account I didn't recognize. The subject line, You should see this. I almost deleted it. Spam, probably. But something about the timing made me open it. Inside was a single attachment, a PDF of a police report from 1987. The report detailed a hit-and-run accident involving a parked car and a pedestrian. The driver had fled the scene. The vehicle was described as a dark blue Mercedes sedan. The suspect was never caught. At the bottom of the report, in the witness statement section, was a name I recognized, Eleanor Hartwell. She'd been walking her dog and had seen the accident. She described the driver as a young man, approximately 25 years old, with dark hair. Richard would have been 25 in 1987. I scrolled down. There was a second attachment, a photo of a dark blue Mercedes, the same model, registered to Richard Hartwell in 1986. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding. Someone was helping me. Someone had access to old police records, to DMV databases, to information that wasn't publicly available. I looked at the email address again. It was a random string of numbers and letters, untraceable. It was a single line of text. Eleanor asked me to keep an eye on things. MB Mitchell Brennan, Grandma's attorney. I called him immediately. Mr. Brennan, this is Maya Hartwell. Maya, I was wondering when you'd call. You sent me that email. I did. Why? Because Eleanor asked me to. She knew Richard would try to manipulate the estate, and she wanted to make sure someone was watching. Someone who couldn't be bought. The hit and run, is it real? It's real. I've had that report for almost 40 years. Eleanor found it while cleaning out Richard's old apartment after he moved out. He'd kept it, hidden in a box of college papers. She never confronted him about it. She was too afraid of what it would do to the family. But she kept the report. Just in case. Just in case of this. Yes. I closed my eyes. What do you want me to do with it? That's up to you, Maya. But I'll tell you this. If you introduce it in court, Richard's credibility evaporates. A man who committed a hit and run and covered it up for 40 years isn't someone a judge will trust to execute an estate honestly. It'll destroy him. Yes. What if I don't want to destroy him? What if I just want what's fair? Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Then offer him a deal. Give him one chance to do the right thing. If he refuses, then you use it. I thanked him and hung up. I spent the rest of the day thinking. Not about revenge. Not about winning. About what Grandma would have wanted. She didn't want me to destroy Richard. She wanted me to give him a choice. She wanted him to have the opportunity to be better than his worst instincts. So I called him. Richard, we need to meet. To discuss the settlement. To discuss the truth. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory. Richard arrived 10 minutes late. A power play I'd expected. He sat down across from me, ordered a black coffee, and leaned back in his chair with forced casualness. So, he said, you've come to your senses. I slid a folder across the table. He opened it. I watched his face as he read the police report. Saw the moment the color drained from his skin, the moment his hand started to shake. Where did you get this? He whispered. Grandma had it. She's had it for almost 40 years. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with something between fear and rage. You can't use this. It's ancient history. The statute of limitations. The statute of limitations for hit and run resulting in injury is 10 years in this state. But the court of public opinion doesn't have a statute of limitations, Richard. Neither does the Bar Association. He closed the folder slowly, carefully, like he was handling a live grenade. What do you want? I want you to honor Grandma's original will. The house goes to me. The trust goes to Iris's daughters. You get the stocks and bonds, like she intended. We settle this quietly, legally, and we never speak of this again. And if I refuse, then I introduce this report in court. I let the judge see exactly who you are, and I let the newspaper pick it up. Your law license, your reputation, your marriage, all of it goes away. He stared at me for a long time. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the desperate weighing of options. He was trying to find a way out, a loophole, a trick. But there wasn't one. You're bluffing, he said finally. I stood up, picking up the folder. Try me. I walked out of the coffee shop and got into my car. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for his answer. I just drove home, hands steady on the wheel, knowing that I'd done what Grandma asked me to do. I'd given him a choice. 2 days later, David Chin called me. Richard's attorney just filed a motion to withdraw the will challenge. They're conceding. The original will stand. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It's over. It's over. What made him change his mind? David paused. I don't know, but whatever you said to him, it worked. I didn't tell David about the police report. I didn't tell anyone. I just went to the courthouse, signed the paperwork, and accepted the keys to Grandma's house from the probate clerk. That night, I drove to the house alone. I unlocked the front door with my old key. The locks had been changed back, and walked through the quiet rooms. Everything was exactly as I remembered. The smell of lemon polish, the creak of the fourth stair, the way the light came through the stained glass window in the hallway and painted rainbows on the floor. I walked upstairs to Grandma's bedroom and stood in the doorway. The bed was made. The closet was closed. Everything was in its place. On the nightstand was a photo I'd taken of Grandma and Iris and me at the lake the summer before Iris died. We were all laughing, sun-drunk and happy, our arms around each other. I picked up the photo and held it, and finally I let myself cry. Not because I'd won, because I'd lost something irreplaceable, but I'd also gained something, the knowledge that when someone you love asks you to be strong, you find a way. Even when it's terrifying, even when it means standing up to family, even when it means becoming the villain in someone else's story. Grandma didn't just leave me a house. She left me the proof that I could fight for what was right, even when the cost was high, and that legacy was worth more than any inheritance. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of Grandma's house, my house, making lemon cake from her recipe. Chloe and Emma were at the table, doing homework, their college funds now fully secured. Marcus was in the living room, helping me hang new curtains. Richard and I haven't spoken since the settlement. I heard through family that he and Patricia reconciled, that he got a job at a smaller firm, that he's trying to rebuild. I don't know if he thinks about that police report, if he wonders whether I still have it. I do. It's in my own safety deposit box now, next to Grandma's letter. Insurance, in case he ever forgets the choice he made. But I don't think about revenge anymore. I think about the girls at my table, about the house that smells like lemons and history, about the way the light still paints rainbows in the hallway. I think about Grandma's ice, the patience she gave me, the quiet strength that looks like nothing until the moment it becomes everything. And I think about the safety deposit box, the one Richard never knew existed, the one that held the truth when everyone else was content to live in the lie. If you've ever had to fight for what's rightfully yours, if you've ever stood up to someone who thought you were too weak to fight back, type justice in the comments. Let's remind each other that the quiet ones are often the most dangerous, because we're the ones who've been paying attention all along.